Alright, guys, it's the Chadwick here, and today I'm joined by a good friend of mine. Y'all might know him. He's an MCU scaler and Star Wars scaler from the Key Issues channel, Key Issues Garrick.
What's going on, Chad? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, me and you recently played the new Resident Evil game, Resident Evil 8 or Resident Evil Village,
Yes,
and
sir.
once we completed it, we got talking about the scaling regards to like in the internal scaling to that game specifically of which character beats who,
hmm
and I thought it could make a pretty decent video. I haven't done a tier list video like this before, so I thought it could be an interesting idea. But just a general gist of what we're going to do is just going to rank the characters based on the thumbnail and title will say who's strongest, but it will be who wins. Pretty much as like we've done tier lists before. With some of our friends, and that's what the general consensus is. It's like who wins rather than like who hits harder, basically.
Right, yeah.
Which obviously does factor into it, but there's um other stuff that plays into it as well. So I think we can start with the lowest first, and we got fucking Donna right now. Before like I explain why she's this low, it's just that they're just like, okay, so Heisenberg and Mother Miranda basically go on this whole thing where the lords are set out in turn. Like when you face the lords, the order you face them in is like strongest or weakest to strongest.
Lady, supersized bitch. Ugly ass psycho doll. An embryonic freak. Don't you get it? It's a test. To see if you're strong enough to be a part of Miranda's family.
I don't want to be a part of Miranda's family.
Neither did I, but here we are. And I'm next in line, right? Kill me, move up the chain.
But I think that their environments and the part of the village that they're in does play a factor into that. And it's just evident with the lore piece we get with Donna, right? Where it's like the plants that she has in her side of the village, like, can basically mind hack you. Um, as soon as you open the gate, pretty much, because you start seeing hallucinations of Ethan's wife.
Ethan.
What?
Ethan, come with me. There's something I have to tell you.
Mia?
So I don't know what you think about that, Garrick.
Right. Yeah, I think the environment plays a major factor in the character's placement on the tier list specifically, and how each character would fare against one another in, a standard battle using standard battle assumptions. Donna, I think the biggest issue with her is her own mental instability, where some of the higher tier characters are going to not have that specific downfall or weakness. So I think that's one thing Donna has going against her. I do think that her mind hacks abilities, or her ability to make you see visions or whatnot, is pretty good, but I don't know how much control over those visions she has. We know that she's able to like move things throughout her house, and it's pretty spooky. And she's able to make her dolls float through her specific power. And her dolls, of course, can attack you. However, the dolls don't seem to be all that strong. Like, some of them have knives, they can stab you, they can cut you. But most of these characters are either not going to be affected by that, A, or B, would just, overpower her before she had a chance to do anything. Because really, if you just destroy the main doll, you win. And if she's not in her environment, that being her house, I don't know how well she would necessarily do. And I think her biggest advantage in her section of the game was really taking away Ethan's weapons.
Yeah.
Because if you had like a gun, you just shoot the main doll in the head, right? And you win
Yeah.
basically immediately. So I mean, I don't really know how she did that. We know the lights went off and all of Ethan's equipment just sort of disappeared
Wait, where's my gun?
and then it reappeared when he left. So that's sort of a weird unknown power, but without knowing like how she was able to do that, if she could replicate something like that outside of her own manor, it's really hard to say, if she could definitively do that. So I think it's hard to put her above the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. So I think she can basically rep D tier by herself, pretty much.
Yeah.
Now the next character, we had a pretty lengthy discussion, I think, about this guy. At one point, he was like in the same above Lady Demetresque. But it was mainly you who persuaded me to put him lower because, again, standard battle assumptions is he'd basically start off in his main form. He's more humanoid, I guess if you want to call it that form. And it's if he can really transform fast enough to his fish form and at that point he may go a tier higher, but he's most likely going to get negged before he can do
Yeah.
anything.
And I think like Donna Moreau, there's a lot of questions surrounding his abilities and how useful they would be. He can summon his goo or whatever and make like walls or barriers, but those are pretty easily destroyed by a couple bullets or even just a knife cutting through them. So that could give him like the opportunity to kind of hide and transform. But then we have the big issue of him being an aquatic creature where he would need a significant body of water to operate in. And even at that point, you don't have to necessarily engage him in that, especially if there was a shore or whatever. He would have to come to the shore to fight whatever other character he needs to fight. So basically, he'd just be swimming in a big lake of water while the other person is on ground, and it would just be a standstill, I guess.
Yeah.
But in standard battle assumptions, I guess most people say, all right, we are in
Central
we are in
Park in New York.
yeah, we're in New York City Central Park, and I don't know, is there a body of water big enough to really take advantage of for Moreau? I don't know. So I think there's a lot of unknowns with the character. I think honestly, you could argue that Donna could even beat him. But I think he has enough tools at his disposal to beat Donna, despite him being sort of like, I guess, not as intellectual as other characters on the list as well.
Yeah, yeah. And now just to expand upon the power, like his powers also, like you mentioned earlier, do factor in with the environment as well. Because once Ethan lets out, pretty much all of the water from his side of the village, via access to that dam, he immediately like leaves where he was swimming around, and he like there's dialogue. He's kind of like spurging out, like worrying about where all his water's gone and everything. And then he's extremely slow when you engage him
Yeah.
in a straight up fight on the other side of the village at that when he reaches that point. So I think he's fine there. Do you
Yeah, I
agree?
agree. I think really he's in C above Donna because if he were able to transform, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he can summon some goo and have the opportunity to do so. He can operate on land, just not as well as he could in the water. And I'm not sure that Donna would have the ability to deal with his like hefty exterior. Even when he shows himself, it does take a decent amount of time for Ethan to kill him, and I don't think Donna has the firepower to take him down. So, assuming he does transform, then he would wash easily. But if he's unable to transform, Donna might have a chance.
Yeah. Now right above him are just all three of Lady Demetresque's daughters. Now, again, the reason why they're in this tier, and like they could go a tier above, I guess. It really all comes down to how you argue it. But it's like how Garrick mentioned earlier. Is if we give him Moreau the benefit of the doubt, and he does transform. He has a pretty good area of effect when he utilises his acid attack. And when you fight the daughters, they're used to like really small AoE based attacks, like a handgun bullet doesn't, or like a sniper rifle round doesn't have that big of an area of effect. So it's completely understandable that their intangibility is able to basically counter those kind of attacks.
Bullets cannot harm.
But we see once they're exposed to like a large AoE effect, or either cold, that there's nothing they can do pretty much. But considering that they don't have to undergo a transformation, that's why they're above Moreau for me. I don't know if you agree with that, Garrick.
Yeah, I think their biggest advantage is their intangibility, and since each is made of a, I guess, hive mind swarm of bugs essentially, and their only weakness is the cold, which, slows them down or makes them solid enough for you to do a significant amount of damage. I'm not sure that these characters below them would be able to do that. Also, them being a swarm gives them a decent amount of flexibility. I'm not sure they would be hampered by Moreau's larger form all that much. They should be able to like tear him apart if they were to swarm him like that. Or they have a lot of good escape options to get away from Moreau's attacks, and I don't think Donna is able to would be able to do anything to them at all. Moreau, like you said, could have an AOE attack that might be able to get rid of them, but them being able to disperse as they do is essentially like a teleportation ability. We see them do that when they come in and they talk to their mother a couple times in the videos or in the game. So I think their versatility is what gives them a distinct advantage.
Yeah. It's also worth to note that Moreau can't actually control his transformation as well, as stated within like Mother Miranda's experimental notes. And just like Miranda, while it's not explicitly stated, it's definitely implied through just the way he speaks, his notes in his book. The way he writes, his speech pattern's kind of like the Incredible Hulk Savage form, where he speaks like in broken sentences, very childlike. And in the artwork within the game, it stated that basically his brain has moved up into his back, which is part of the reason like he's a hunchback. So he's also pretty mentally deficient as well. So pretty decent handicap from there, which is just another piece of complementary evidence as to why he should be bottom of C rather than any higher.
Agree.
So next we got Dad of the Year, Ethan Winters.
Yes, sir.
Now, the reason I put him here, not only higher, is I think Chris just outskills him, like just blatantly, and he does that in the game. Now, granted, Chris does sneak up on him, but I don't really think that matters because while it's stated that Ethan and Mia had both received military training after Resident Evil 7, Ethan does get restrained by one of just Chris's goons, despite countering him initially.
What the fuck are they doing here? Get off of me! Stay the fuck down!
And Chris should just blatantly be above the Foxhound members in skill, just based on consistent lore. And I was going to say right now, I'm not really going to put any of the lore statements regarding him in this video, because I have an entire video dedicated to Chris on my channel already. But the best thing Ethan has going for him, I'd say, is his regen. and even that, it's like very strange because if you were to like cut his arm off, he's not going to be able to just regrow that arm. He needs to get the severed arm and reattach it, like when Lady Demetress cuts his arm off when he's trying to like pull down the lever. He has to go back and get that hand and then reattach it to himself before he can proceed any further. So... What do you think, Garrick?
Yeah, I think Ethan really just gets outgunned entirely by Chris. So I'm not sure that there's much that he would be able to do. He's outskilled and just has way less firepower than Chris can output. So I think the constant onslaught would just be too much for Ethan to handle. And then of course Ethan, beat the characters that are below him.
Yeah.
Now, of course, he's going to have beaten the characters that are above him, but there are certain specific reasons as to why he was able to do that, which, we'll get to here in a bit.
Yeah. Again, Chris, I don't feel needs any more explanation. Like Garrett just said, he just outguns Ethan, and like I said, I think he just blatantly outskills him as well. So now we're moving on to probably like the most controversial tier. Just based on like how Garrick said, Ethan did beat these characters above him, but there are specific circumstances, whether explicit or implicit, within the game. And so the first character I'm going to put in A tier is Lady Demetresque. And while she's the first boss you face, the reason why Ethan is able to actually do anything to her is because there is a specific dagger within the game that was basically specifically made and coated with like a mixture of poisons from all across Europe to specifically harm her, and she had to hide it away because she was basically scared of it. And Ethan finds it, and that's why he's able to trigger a mutation. Plus, within Mother Miranda's experimental notes, it stated that because Lady Demetresque's regen is so potent and just overwhelming, she needs to consume a sufficient amount of blood or flesh in a time period. Now we know that in the game, once Ethan gets to Castle Demetresque, that Mother Miranda implies that he was going to be the next basically meal for her, and she spent the entire time stalking the corridors. And there's even a point where she gets a bottle of, like, to her it's wine, I guess, but what it is actually blood. But she doesn't actually drink it, she just leaves it in a bowl soaking. So based on that, you can just deduce that she's basically nerfed when she pulls up to Ethan, and then he proceeds to hard counter her even more.
Yeah, and even despite that nerf, whenever you're playing as Ethan and she's chasing you, you can shoot her with whatever you have. You can lay mines down. She's completely unaffected by it. And he needed the dagger specifically to beat her. I think in standard battle assumptions, you would probably say, okay, she's recently had a meal and is at her strongest. I don't know why you would introduce a character into a battle weaker than they are. But yeah, I think Lady Demetresque is definitely one of the strongest characters compared to, the other lords. And I think you can even make an argument that she would beat Heisenberg based on her regeneration and invulnerability. But yeah, I think she's one of the top tier characters in the game, and specifically needed to be nerfed multiple times for Ethan to even contend with her at all. So yeah, I stand is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, that's the entire reason you got the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie about it. So
and just to like back up the whole, some people might look at what you said about her not taking damage from attacks when she's chasing you as a gameplay mechanic thing, but even in previous games, like the Resident Evil 2 remake, or even Resident Evil 7, when you have the stalker bosses, they do take damage. Like, you're able to damage Mr. X in Resident Evil 2, and
Jesus Christ!
you're able to damage Jack Baker in Resident Evil 7. And I think you're also able to damage Nemesis in the Resident Evil 3 remake as well. So, really, that aspect of her not being able to take damage when she's like chasing you, is just, I think you could just toss it down to like just a really good piece of evidence as to how just crazy her regen is. Because it's also mentioned in Mother Miranda's notes as well that it's like extremely good.
Yeah.
All right, we've got the boy Heisenberg, the Magneto of the verse. This guy, he probably has one of the most outlandish abilities in the entire verse. Where it's basically he has an electric current, similar to a specific type of eel. The species escapes me at the moment, but basically he's able to control electromagnetic fields around objects, and he specifically again goes the Magneto route and throws around pieces of metal. You know, we see that he's easily able to pierce Ethan at the start of the game when he meets him.
Didn't think anyone was left. You must be pretty tough. Huh.
Who the fuck are you?
Oh, you're not local. Even better.
And he's also the last Lord you face, and there's no, I guess, considering he's in a factory which is full of metal, you can kind of argue he has an environmental advantage, but we see, just like Lady Dimitrescu, he's physically capable of fighting by himself. And again, it's not specifically mentioned that all he can control is metal. It's that he specifically can control electromagnetic fields. So he could hypothetically just fucking ragdoll some people, I guess. But that's why I have him above Lady Dimitrescu. Plus, I think if he just does to her what he does to Ethan at the start, which is basically just seal her in a sufficient amount of metal, then there's probably nothing she can do. But it's very contentious. What were you gonna say?
There are. I know some people might say, okay, well, in standard battle assumptions, how much metal is there really going to be around? But I mean, in the area that they're going to be in, and let's just assume that it is just Central Park in some, parallel dimension that's pocket dimension, right? With no New York City around it, there still is a significant amount of metal, whether it be, iron bars within concrete structures or nails or whatever, within the constructs that are built within Central Park. There's also the Central Park Zoo, so there's a ton of metal that he could take advantage of. But yeah, I think, like you said, really the only way he would be able to defeat Dimitrescu, in my opinion, is to seal her up like that. So it really just comes down to how you argue it. I think this tier, like you said, when we first got into it, is the most contentious. But yeah, I think it's a good fight. I think it's a good discussion to have. And I guess, it could be a cool discussion for us to have at a later time in a more elaborate video. Since each of us thinks the other wins, but yeah, I think it's really close.
Yeah. So moving on to S tier. Now, at one point, this character, kind of like, I thought, fucked the scaling, because she does lose to Ethan. But after going back and watching the cutscenes, it's basically because the ceremony she uses to like attempt to resurrect her deceased daughter, she just outright states that it weakens her pretty much. Verbatim says that her power is leaving her.
My power is leaving me!
And then if you want to take, if you don't want to take that, there's also the fact that during the boss fight when she engages Ethan, she talks about the Mega Mycite, and Ethan's like, basically says, "Yeah, but you're insane. So you can't utilize this power properly."
The Megamycete saved me from the pits of despair. It granted me this splendid power!
Yeah, right. All it's done is drive you nuts.
And anyone, and I think me and Garrick spoke about this earlier, when we were talking about his Iron Fist vid, which you guys should definitely check out, is that I think the general consensus is for pretty much every verse that has fighting in, is that if you're mentally or emotionally compromised, your performance is going to be very sloppy. And this is shared in verses from anywhere from Star Wars to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and you can even look at real life instances in like the UFC or boxing. So yeah, she basically had a double nerf when she engaged Ethan, and it's pretty much just blatantly shown that she can just neg Ethan, because even in her regular form, she just rips his heart out, and there's nothing he can do about it. But then,
Miranda, you coward! Come out and face me!
Don't worry. Your death will come quick.
and obviously later when she gets the nerf, when she's in her like attack form, she loses. So there is, like we mentioned earlier, there is context behind it. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, all the lords are afraid of her. Heisenberg went through this elaborate plan of building this giant army to even try and contend with her.
That boulder punching asshole! But you're first!
So there's definitely a reason why she should be above the other lords. And then, of course, like you said, there is context when you're discussing why she lost to Ethan. Same goes with Lady Dimitrescu and the dagger, as well as Heisenberg and Ethan having, literally a machine that was built to counter him.
Yeah.
So Mother Miranda embodies all of that in one, and her just blatantly being more powerful than the lords is pretty much explicitly and implicitly stated throughout the game. So I think it is, pretty blatant that she should be a tier above the two strongest lords, at least in our opinion.
Yeah. So last character, Rose Winters. Now, there's some scaling we got to get into here. So not only was Mother Miranda scared of Rose as a baby, as stated by Heisenberg.
Do you have any idea how powerful that kid is? Even Miranda's scared of her.
But there's a statement that Rose had inherited the powers of
The
Evelyn
little girl from Seven.
Yeah, from Resident Evil 7.
Remember Evelyn and her power over them all? Rose is her successor. No. Rose is Evelyn's true, complete form.
So as a baby, obviously she can't utilize it. But as a baby, she should have those powers. And if Miranda's scared of her as a baby, and then we know, she not only does obviously she get older, but she states at the end that she can do stuff that even Chris doesn't know she can do.
I can show you things even Chris doesn't know I can do.
And Chris is in Resident Evil 7. There's an entire DLC where you play as him. So he should have a sufficient amount of evidence based on what the mold, which is basically her powers, can do. So she would have just basically gone above and beyond the point where Miranda was scared of her, which is why that in my opinion warrants her own tier in S+.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the biggest thing is that final statement that you mentioned about her being able to do and go above what Chris thought, was possible or could even comprehend when he understands Miranda's powers pretty intimately at this point. He was bamboozled by her at the beginning of the game, when they quote unquote killed her and then captured her body. But now he understands that she has that ability. She knows, or he sees her in action. He should know everything that the mold can do up to this point in terms of what we've seen or what we know that Chris has seen or researched. Obviously, I think we can agree that the character in verse would know more than the audience would based on the significant amount of research that they've been doing and the limited amount of research that we have gotten access to within the game. Only a few files here or there where there's probably, terabytes of information that we are not made aware of. So her having abilities beyond that scope is pretty impressive. So I think based on that alone, she should be above Mother Miranda and at the top of the list. And I think, we'll see a little bit more of that in the next game or maybe in some DLC. You never know.
Oh yeah, I mean, hopefully. I know there's some talks of some DLC. There was some apparent leaks on Steam about it, so we'll see in the future. But that's pretty much the list, and I guess the video as a whole, done and dusted with. If you guys want to talk to me about it, or I guess Garrick, he's definitely a better debater than I am. But not everything needs to be a debate, right? Just have a civil, calm discussion about it. So again, if any of you guys want to talk about it, feel free to hit up the Kyushu Discord. That's where I'm modding, and that's obviously Garrick owns it. I'll basically leave a couple of Discords where I'm active. So there'll be Kyushu's Discord, my friend Crysis's Discord, and the Discord that I own, Daybreak. So yeah, Garrick, thanks for joining me.
Hey, no
Much
problem, man. It was
appreciated.
fun.
Yeah, pretty good. Maybe like you said, we can probably do a video on Heisenberg versus Demetresk at one point. Another cheeky collab.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
but we'll see what the future holds. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll see you later.